Hi, this is Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that spotlights the stars of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So sit back, relax, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. This episode isn't about music. This one here involves a fascinating friend of mine who's basically a jack of all trades. He's excelled in sports, he's excelled in marketing, and he is excelling in his latest venture, writing. Will you please welcome a longtime friend of mine, Bob Wilber. Bob, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Rick. Great to talk to you. Great to hear you.
First time Bob and I met had to be back in about 2003. You were handling the media for Checker, Shucks, and Craig, and that was the Worsham family's team. And then later, the Levi Ray and Shop team of Tim Wilkerson. Those were some fun times back then, weren't they, Bob?
You know, talk about lucky. My wife used to continually ask me, if you couldn't work for Dell, who would you work for? And I always said, it'd probably be that Wilkerson guy. So I ended up spending 20 years working for Dell Worsham and Tim Wilkerson. And I mean, don't even at me, don't even fight me. There are no two better people in drag racing. And I got to work with both of them. And especially at the finals, of course, when Chuck pulls out that Megarita machine, you know. Yes. You know, I shouldn't even go there. I mean, I was always against that thing because I thought we're going to hurt somebody with this. And I think we got away with it and never did. But it oh my gosh, did it draw a crowd? We had to hire literally security people because people wanted to stand 1 foot from a nitro motor as it mixed margaritas. And like I was yelling at him, you'll notice none of the crew are trying to do this. We know better.
And you're constantly adjusting the clutch on it, trying to get the best mix, right?
Oh, yeah, the best mix, yeah. You don't want to leave soft and then try to pick up speed later. You're just going to smoke the tires. So, you know.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about your past, but first let's talk about another book that you've got out. This is called How Far? A Tale of Determination, DNA, and Drama. Bob, in a nutshell, what's it about?
It is about two fictional characters, a baseball player who's kind of a surfer dude, and his parents are hippies, and he's from Southern California. He is a gifted baseball pitcher with a golden arm, and he's a good kid. He's a mama's boy. He loves his parents. I mean, he lives this idyllic dream in Southern California where you go to school, you get straight A's, you go surf for a while, and for 10 months out of the year you play baseball. And so I really enjoyed his character because I know a lot of those guys, and I put a lot of them together into that fictional character. The other guy, also fictional, is a hockey player from the little town of Roseau, Minnesota, which is all the way up at the top of the state, about 9 miles from Canada. And it is very Scandinavian up there, very stoic. So their personalities are 100%, 180 out, you know, as we say in drag racing when you're completely opposite. His name is Eric, and he is a molding together of a whole bunch of people that I've met in Roseau. And I went up there two times and spent time with just about everybody I could in town. Hockey isn't just a thing there. It's a way of life.
Absolutely. Yep. There's
2,600 people in Roseau. It never really fluctuates because the founding factory for Polaris is there. Mm-hmm. That's their headquarters. So the population is just never changes. There's, as the mayor once told me, I could double our population in a week, but when we have the jobs for them, but it's hard to get people to move to 9 miles from Canada.
Right.
So, but hockey is everything there. So, and they've sent they've sent probably a dozen players to the NHL out of that little town. And
Wow.
I found it fascinating that they've won the state championship so many times when it was single class. You had to beat all the big Twin City schools, and they did it. And so fascinating character to be so opposite of my baseball guy. I then decided to write it in their voices as if they wrote the book, and we alternate chapters, and they tell the same story from two completely different perspectives because that's how it would have been if they were real guys. Technically, it falls in the historical fiction genre, which means there's real events and real things going on and real other names you'll recognize. That all has to be right because you can't just make that up, right? I mean, so I did a lot of research to make sure all this other background information was absolutely correct, but then I get to plot my two completely made up characters into the middle of it.
There you go. What was the inspiration of writing this one, Bob?
Well, when I got done with my first book, which was my autobiography, Bats, Balls, and Burnouts, after we let that digest for a while and did all the promotion for it, I'm like, what's next? And I had a couple of ideas, and they just didn't stick. And that's how I tell if it's worth writing or not. If I go to bed thinking it's a great idea and wake up in the morning, I'm like, what was I thinking? Mm-hmm. Then that's not what you're supposed to do. So I just thought about this historical fiction genre. It stuck with me. It stayed with me. I had read a book back in the 80s that was written by two different authors who were very successful, and they wrote it as two fictional characters roaming the country after a very short but very deadly World War III.
Wow.
And they wanted to see the book was called War Day, and it was by Whitley Strieber and James Kunetka, and they alternated chapters as these two fictional characters, literally however they can get around, because there's no airplanes or cars, and see what's left. And that book just stuck with me. I read that in the mid-'80s. And all of a sudden, I was reminded of it, and I thought, my first thought was, I could find a co-writer and we'll write this as these two characters. And then I slept on that and woke up and told my wife, no, I can write this. I'm going to write both guys.
Awesome.
So that was the germ for it, and it spread into something that people are apparently really enjoying. So I'm very proud of that.
Do you have a specific writing process, Bob? Do you do specific look at a specific time, or is it one of those things that you just have to do it when it's happening?
When I'm in the first stages of it, I tend to engage my brain in the mornings by doing the research. Whether it was my autobiography or this book, there was just so much research to do, because I can't have my fictional characters go into the World Series if that team didn't go to the World Series. Then it just becomes a fiction book, and I wanted it to be historical. So I would typically research all morning, maybe go for a little drive, have lunch, and then write. My limit's about 4 or 5 hours straight without stopping. I've got old athlete injuries, and my neck starts to hurt, and my lower back starts to hurt if I go further. Once you get close to your deadline, all that goes out the window. It's just do your research, write, get another chapter done, get it done by deadline, and get it shipped in. So,
has Barbara provided any input on this?
Yeah, she has. Absolutely. She provides input on everything.
I figured this figures much.
Well, and it's very much appreciated too, because she has great thoughts, and she's got a very insightful brain. That's one of the reasons I married her about 50. But yeah, she helped me with making sure it wasn't a guy book. It's not for jocks. And I think most of the best reviews it's gotten have been from women who just really appreciated the families involved, and how the women are, how strong the women are, and how these two guys understand from childhood that you just don't say, "Hey, Mom, you can't do that." And so because of that, many of the characters in it, of course, my two main characters are fictional, but their families have to be fictional too. So I had the chance to really mold some people in that vein, and I think that's what I'm most proud of, is that it really does, thanks to my wife's input, really does cover that fairly and in a kind of a progressive today way.
Wonderful. We're going to include the link to the show notes so you can get this for Christmas. The book is called How Far? A Tale of Determination, DNA, and Drama from Bob Wilber. The link is going to be in the show notes, and I want to make sure you get some copies of that for anyone on your Christmas list. It's good. It's a family book. It could be from what age is up, Bob?
I'd say teens on up.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Now, and I say there's two ways you can go to Amazon, of course, and search for it, which might take you like 3 clicks to find it. Or you can just go to my website, bobwilber.net. And we'll there's a link right there, take you right to the page that sells it.
All right, we will include that in the show notes there. And now we were also talking about another book that Bob has. It's called, this is one I really enjoyed, and I highly recommend this for the sports lover on your list. Bats, Balls, and Burnouts, the autobiography of Bob Wilber. This is a fascinating story, folks, and let me explain why. Because Bob had I don't know if you call it a privilege or the honor or whatever you might want to call it, maybe the curse of some ways, of being the son of a professional athlete. Your dad was Del Wilber.
My dad, yes, I call it luck, because you can't pick your parents, and I won the lottery. My dad played in the major leagues for a little over 9 years for the Cardinals, Phillies, and Red Sox, and then either managed, scouted, or coached until he retired at around 75. He spent his entire adult life in baseball.
Wonderful. That is so cool.
And he was always a backup, but he was a successful backup. He had a very fine career, and he made a lot of friends. And unfortunately, I never got to see him play because I was born in '56, and his last year was '54, I think.
Oh, okay.
But I got to see him manage, and I got to be his bat boy at AAA in Denver and Spokane. So that was fun. But what a way to grow up! I always say this, if there's a knock on the door at our home in suburban Kirkwood, Missouri, outside St. Louis, which is where we live because the Cardinals were his first team, and we kept roots there. So if there was a knock on the door, it wasn't likely, but it was not impossible that it was Stan Musial out there. So that's just the way it was. That's the way I grew up. Those are just my dad's friends from work. That's the way I saw it.
Well, the very traditional question for anyone who's in St. Louis, what high school did you graduate from? Absolutely.
Everybody asks that first. St. Louis U High. I'm a junior Billiken, class of '74.
There you go. Very good. After there, you wound up going to, SIUE, right?
I got a full scholarship to SIUE to be a Cougar, and was part of two teams that went to the College World Series. That's the Division II World Series back then. They're a Division I school now. My timing was poor. Anyway, I was part of those two very successful teams that went to the Division II World Series, and both of those teams have been inducted into the SIUE Hall of Fame.
Wonderful. Well, let me see. We talked about the fact that you were in baseball, and you're also in soccer. You did soccer for many years, too.
Yeah, after my playing days were over, I became a baseball scout for 5 years for the Toronto Blue Jays, and then went into sports marketing. I worked for Converse Shoes in their heyday when, we tossed around names like Larry and Magic and Dr. J left and right because they were all wearing Converse at the time.
Right.
And then went to work for my brother, Del Wilber Jr., at his sports marketing firm, and we dealt with just a powerhouse of Fortune 500 companies, doing marketing plans for them and putting sponsorships together. And through that, I got to know the people at the Major Indoor Soccer League because we actually put a sponsorship together for them. And about a year later, after that deal, the former commissioner of the MISL was Bill Kentling, and he got me an interview with this new expansion team coming to St. Louis called the St. Louis Storm. And again, without much thought, without even analyzing how it would affect my life, I said, I'm going to go do that now. So I basically ran that team. I was hired as the vice president of marketing and sales for the St. Louis Storm indoor soccer franchise, played at the old arena in St. Louis. And they fired the general manager like a week before the opening night. So I got to take over his job and his kind of his title, but not his salary. So,
jeez. So you got to play in the old Checker Dome, huh?
Oh yeah. I love that place. I grew up in it, and to work there was really a personal career highlight for me. To get my car every morning and drive to the arena and park. And our offices were in the East Tower, out in the front of the arena. There's two twin towers. Go up there and write proposals and sell tickets and get the game ready. And when they hired me, we were like 60 days away from our first ever opening night. We didn't have a uniform. We didn't have a soccer ball, and we didn't have any players.
That makes it kind of difficult.
It was a little hard. Let's just say it was a thrash. So we got a staff hired, and we put it all together. And another one of my proudest moments in marketing is the fact that on opening night, first ever game played by the St. Louis Storm, we drew 14,500.
Wow.
And that's a boastful moment when you're standing there and your buttons are popping off your jacket because you did that.
Wow.
You don't just put a franchise together and hang out the on sale sign. You have to go out there and push that team and get people to know who you are. You have to brand it.
Right.
And I thought that was something I could always be proud of. But yeah, love my indoor soccer time.
And after that, you wound up in the National Hot Rod Association, huh?
Again, guess who comes to the rescue? Bill Kentling, the former commissioner of the MISL. He had been the president at Heartland Park.
Oh, Heartland Park, Topeka, right? Yeah.
Right. And he found me somewhere at a hotel in Scottsdale, Arizona, doing athletic apparel marketing still, and said, this is his famous quote, Bob, I got good news and bad news. I said, all right, Bill, what's the good news? He said, well, we're going to go racing together. I said, Bill, I don't know anything about racing. He said, son, I don't know anything about it either. That's why I called you. I don't want a race fan. I want a marketing guy. He said, we'll learn this together. I said, okay, what's the bad news? He goes, well, we're going to do it in Topeka, Kansas. And I said, I'm there. I was living in Southern California and dealing with all that pretense and traffic. I said, Bill, I'm there tomorrow. I'll pack this stuff up and get there tomorrow. I can't wait to get back to the Midwest.
Wonderful.
So that got me into racing there, and from there I knew I wanted to work for a team, not for the track. That it's fun working for the track, but you can't win or lose. And if you grew up in sports, you grew up winning and losing.
Right.
So,
until the soccer moms took over.
Yeah, that too. So I did start at the very bottom as an assistant PR guy, and then went out on my own and went broke a couple times. And then, as fate would have it, I called Del Worsham in the middle of '96. Yeah, I think. Maybe it was early '97, and we just decided that he knew me, he knew my work. I'd been around a little bit. I had made at least a little bit of a name for myself in the PR room, and we got together, and he and Chuck basically handed me the keys to that whole side of the operation. Like, we're gonna run the car. You do all the sponsor stuff. You do all the PR. It's on you, and together we'll grow this thing. And our first sponsorship in '97 was $200,000 from Checker, Shucks, and Craig. Mm-hmm. And we painted the car, bought uniforms, and it was almost all gone. But we did well, and we kept growing. And by the end of it, when CSK was being purchased by O'Reilly and we knew it was over, we were up to about $2.8 million with 2 cars and 4 big rigs on the road. And it was a big operation by then, and we were winning a lot of races. It was a lot of fun.
Now, Del was in the red car. Was Phil Burkhart in the blue car? Who was in the blue car?
First driver in the blue car was Frankie Pedregon.
Okay.
And then Johnny Gray.
Okay.
For about a year and a half. And then Burkhart. And then the last blue car driver was Jeff Arend.
Jeff Arend, yeah. All friends of mine.
And all friends of mine, too. I still hear from Burkhart and Arend all the time on Facebook.
Well, Jeff just celebrated an anniversary, 25th anniversary.
How about that? I'm going to celebrate my 25th on New Year's Eve this year.
Awesome. Very, very good. Now, we've all traveled. In your sports, you've done it in all different realms. There's a section we include in this podcast called Tales from the Road, and it has to do with those unusual moments of getting to and from an event or something that happened with your accommodations or something that happened at the event. What was your most unusual Tales from the Road, Bob?
Well, I'm taking a list of about 1,050 and trying to boil it down to one.
Okay. We've got time. We got time for 2 if you want.
Okay, no, I'll do this one because it always comes to mind, and I wrote about this in Bats, Balls, and Burnouts too. The backstory is that I was in my second year of minor league baseball for the Detroit Tigers, and I was playing in Lakeland, Florida, in the Florida State League. When you play in the Florida State League, you play in the ballparks that the big leaguers use for spring training. So you're in a stadium with a big major league clubhouse. Everything is first class. It's not a tough bus league. It's 2 divisions back then, and we would literally not even play road trips. We would go to St. Pete one night. They'd come to our place the next night. We'd go to Tampa the next night. And you just played 140 games in 140 days. You just kept playing every day. But we had first class everything. Our beautiful bus had Lakeland Tigers Baseball Club written down the sides, and they released me in mid-season. And by the time I drove home 2 days later, the Oakland A's had called and offered me a contract.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I pulled in the driveway, and I had spent 2 days driving after being released, like wrestling with that fact, and the dream was over, and it's okay now. And, I was a broadcast journalism major at SIUE, so I thought, well, I'm just going to go back to school and finish my degree and put my tapes together, and we'll see what happens. And as I pull in the driveway in Kirkwood, my mom runs down the front steps yelling something that I couldn't decipher, and I opened the car door. I said, "What?" She said, "You're an Oakland A." I said, "Okay." And the good news, that's the good news. The bad news is they want you in Medford, Oregon tomorrow.
Oh, no.
I had just driven from Florida. So I hopped on a plane at 6 a.m. and went to Medford, Oregon, and couldn't have been any more. It was a wonderful little ballpark out there, seated about, 1,500, 3,000 people, somewhere in there. But our clubhouse was one big rectangular room with a bench around the wall, and then 2x4s tacked into the cement wall above that with nails. And as your locker, you got 3 nails.
It sounds like your typical hockey thing.
Oh, it was such a harsh change of reality from being in a big league team clubhouse, and to go to that. Here's your nails. That one's rusty. That one's bent. So be careful. Right. And I got a hint from that this was going to be a little different than Lakeland until I went outside after my first day there and got there and met the manager, who was, by the way, Rich Morales, who used to play shortstop for the White Sox.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I know that name. Son of a gun.
Yeah, he's just a prince, man. I love that guy. He was my favorite manager of all time in pro ball. He was just a great guy. Anyway, Rich takes us outside and shows us this pile of rusted junk and said, "That's our bus." It was about a 1945 Greyhound with the original interior.
So it was a lot like Major League, the movie Major League.
It was way, way worse than Major League.
And DC-3 maybe going to your next gig with a pilot putting duct tape on the...
Pretty much. So, I mean, that bus was so bad. And we were embarrassed by it. We once went up to play in Victoria, British Columbia. That was the furthest team away from us, about a 16-hour ride.
Oh, my.
And to get there, you have to go on a ferry that carries trucks and buses and cars. And we're in line in our bus. We're professional baseball players. We get paid to play baseball. We're in our bus, kind of slunk down on our little seats, because this bus was so old, the windows were like almost portholes. You know, they weren't the big Scenic Cruiser windows. But we look to the left, and there's a beautiful brand new charter bus with a whole bunch of Girl Scouts on it, pointing at our bus, laughing. And we looked at each other like, "Oh my God, how far have we sunk?"
We made it. Anyway, big leagues at last, Mom.
We finally made it. On one of our first long road trips before the Victoria incident, this never happened in the middle of the afternoon, mind you. This only happened in the middle of the night, and that was our bus conked out, and we pulled over to the side. We had been going home to Medford from Bend, Oregon, where we'd played the Phillies. It's 2 a.m. There's no phones. There's no cell phones. There's no traffic on this little 2-lane highway we're on. And we're all just sitting there not knowing what to do. And Rich sees headlights coming, and he jumps out and flags them down. Now, my best friend on that team, who I'm still friends with, was another outfielder by the name of Mike Altobelli, and he was from Chicago. And Alto and I were inseparable. Anyway, Rich comes back on the bus, and he says, "Listen, I don't know when we're going to get help here. There's a young couple in this car. They're going to Medford. If any of you guys want to ride with them, it's on you. You're taking the risk." I mean, by the time he said the word risk, Alto and I were off the bus. And we didn't know these people. It was pitch black. Yeah. You know, but to us, getting off that bus and getting home was worth the risk. Jeez. And sure enough, they took us right to our apartment. But that's life in the minor leagues right there. I mean, that's it.
So all you kids listening now, with all your thoughts of maybe becoming a major leaguer, listen to my buddy Bob Wilber about what it's like to be in the minors. And I want everyone to get a copy of this book. Go to bobwilber.net and get yourself a couple hundred copies of this book for everybody on your Christmas list, okay? I highly recommend the Bats, Balls, and Burnouts. I got to check out the How Far. I'm going to have to get that one for Christmas there, Bob. And one thing I wanted to ask you before you go, what's next for you?
Another book. We're really heavy into promoting this one. I've got about 12 interviews this week, and glad to do yours. So,
thanks, buddy.
I don't know about the rest of them. And I don't know yet what it'll be. I wrote How Far to make it the biggest challenge possible, a completely different style of writing than I've ever done before in my life. And I don't know if I'll stick with that and a sequel is possible because the two characters, the book ends when their careers end, not when their lives end. Mm-hmm. So they'll have kids. There'll be more stories. I might do that. I don't want to promise that to anybody because something better might come along. You know, somewhere down the road, I think there's a Del Worsham book, and I'd like to help him write it.
Oh, there you go. Very cool.
I'm not sure he's ready until he's done. You know, he's so busy. He doesn't have an on-off. He has an on-off switch. He does not have.
I know he's got the twin girls and everything. What are they, teenagers?
Now,
yeah. Oh my God! Has it been that long? I remember when they were. I remember when they were born.
I do too. I remember the day they were born.
Oh, God. Because I remember standing in the media center right next to Del saying, "How's the girls doing?" And he had to go on for like 5 minutes about the girls, what they're doing, what they did that week. He was just such a proud papa.
Yeah, and they love him, and he is a great papa, and Connie's a wonderful mom. It's a wonderful story, and I it's sad for me that Maddie and Kate don't call me Bobby Bob anymore.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so another book for you. So what we might have to do is have you on again at a couple years down the road for a future podcast as you're promoting your next book. It's called I Am Barbara's Husband.
That's it.
There you go.
Hey, and before I go, and I know this will be in your notes, but I always say this to people when I tell them my name, Bob Wilber, and that's Wilber. I am not one of the Wright brothers, and I am not the guy who owned Mr. Ed.
There you go. Absolutely. Good luck.
I just dated myself there, didn't I?
You and I are the same age. Another reason why I love this guy, he and I are huge Rush fans.
Oh, yeah. That too, eh?
Yeah. Well, every time I play a Rush song in the afternoon, I always say, you could tell there's a smile on my face because I'm playing Rush right now.
Oh, that's awesome.
Real good.
Yeah, and that's funny. Here's Small World issue. Last time I saw them, I did not get to see the final tour. It was the Clockwork Angels tour. Mm-hmm. Barbara and I flew back down to Anaheim, and Jeff and Wendy Arend were at the show too.
Oh,
and
wow.
we hung out for them for a while. And then and saw them, somehow found them again outside the crush of humanity, outside the arena going back to our cars, and Jeff was just beaming. He said, greatest concert ever!
It's funny. The question I had yesterday was Drummer's Day, and I was I was asking who's the greatest drummer, and I would say about 70% said Neil Peart. So the Professor, you can't go wrong with the Professor. Heaven's got a heck of a band up there right now, doesn't it? With Eddie,
yeah, and sadly, the band's getting better very quickly.
I hate to say that.
I mean, it just happening left and right, and that's just a matter of we all age, and the further you get in this life, the faster they leave you. You know, it's sad. That's the sad part of it.
Absolutely. Well, God bless you, brother. Have yourself a wonderful holiday season. Give Barbara my love, and tell everyone up there in Minnesota that your Vikings are going to go to the Super Bowl.
Thanks. You just jinxed everything.
Oh no! I didn't say they're going to. I didn't say they're going to win, but
okay. I'm with you.
God bless you, brother. Listen, it's always great talking with you, Bob. And I want everyone to go to bobwilber.net and get yourself a couple hundred copies of this book.
You're the man, Rick. I appreciate it very much.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.